All right, we are live. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to host Clifton Harness. I think this man doesn't need any introduction in AEC space. He is the CEO and co-founder of Testfit INC, and one of my favorite Twitter pastime is looking at what new GIFs Clifton has created during the week about the new feature release of Testfit, and I had a chance to meet him in person during AEC Tech, and he's like amazing person to hang out with. So thanks a lot, Clifton, to be on the show.
Well, you're making it hard for me to make an impression, like a good impression of my own on the audience here, but I'll try to live up to your expectations.
Yeah, like and like as I was talking to you earlier, like the one intent I have for this show is to have like that Joe Rogan and Elon Musk type chill conversation. So I'm very excited for this.
I'll try not to smoke too much weed during the call.
All right, so I'm gonna start with a very difficult question, and uh, if the answer is confidential, you can avoid to answer. So, Clifton, what's your favorite restaurant?
My favorite restaurant?
Yeah,
Oh man. So Chipotle, probably. Yeah. Yep.
like
I'm not. Do I need to explain why? I'll explain why. I'm from San Antonio, Texas, and in 2019, I traveled to roughly 30 cities in that year, and like at some point, you kind of get sick of eating new kinds of food, and you just like whatever. I'm gonna go get like a burrito and like be happy with my burrito. So I would say like it's my comfort food, and so Chipotle is it's my favorite restaurant.
I see. And like starting with your journey from your undergrad till date, like how has your perspective towards AC evolved with time?
Um, so when I was an undergrad, my perspective was that of like the architecture intern. I think I was part of a small cohort of architecture students that was eagerly going into internships, every summer. And, um, when I was there, in this is the early 2010s, like 2011, 2012, 2013. That's circa my experience in capital A architecture firms. Um, I was frustrated, like I really loved the people and I loved the projects. But like the clear lack of adoption of like just basic BIM tools, and like they're like why is it such a I remember someone training me on how to use the block editor in AutoCAD, and their reaction was like, oh, never edit the block on its own, always edit it in place, so that way you have like you understand the context around the block. And I'm just like, okay, I understand that, but like the point of a block is that it's like an acontextual, repeatable piece of information that you use again and again and again. So like, I there was a pretty big disconnect between process, like the software world process, and like the things that we were doing on product. So that that was the early days. Then I had some success in architecture school on the design side. Like I really love designing things, but it sort of came up empty. And then when you realize to be like an incredibly successful architect, you have to be like not only about like the big idea in a project, but like also like how that idea permeates into every single scale of the project. And like the moment I started drawing like wall sections and actually figuring out like how to implement the incredibly well crafted design that we were doing, I lost interest, because the joy for me was like this like the big move and the the big sort of planning piece. Um And at the same time, I come from a real estate development family. My dad's an apartment guy. He's done 20,000 units in his career. His perspective was always around housing. And, here I was at high end architecture design firm, designing some house for the ultra rich. And like my dad's talking about like, housing 300 people. So there was a disparity. Like I was sort of called to that commodity world just by the very nature of like being my father's son. But his perspective was like garden apartments, lower density, lots and lots of buildings, with surface parking, right? Like that was where he was coming from. And I went to UT. It was new urbanist, like there's going to be this resurgence of people that want to live and work in the same place. And people in my generation that like we spent a lot of time in the car going to and from school and stuff. Like when I my professional walk, like I was like, oh my gosh, I want to be like no more than 15 minutes away from like wherever my job is. So there's a demographic shift. And when I sort of felt that, I was like, okay, I'm going to go find a real estate developer that's not my dad, that does high density, that, that I could work for. And this amazing opportunity just fell into my lap to work at Streetlights Residential, which to my knowledge at that point in time was like one of the only design driven developers that also had a construction company. And like there was a huge opportunity to see how design, construction, development, like all work together there. So, right out of college, I went and worked at Streetlights, drawing unit plans, coordinating the unit plan with construction, coordinating the unit plan with like the finance guys with like, here's how much rent we can get out of this unit. And then that led into me solving site plans. And I think there's 8 buildings in the US today that are Clifton harness plan buildings that are built. I get incredibly defensive and proud of them when people are criticizing them on Twitter, but they don't have to know they're mine. But they were all new urbanists. Like the goal was higher density, structured parking. We don't want to fill our entire cities full of surface parking. And that's what Streetlights is really good at. But I was always dismayed by process. Like, there was even at Streetlights, this incredible company that has figured out, how to get amazingly detailed from a design perspective buildings built, in the United States, which is really hard because it's a private market and, the government's not really helping you in development that much in the US. And, even at Streetlights, we were having this process problem of like, we were unable to do as many site plans as we possibly could to fit the demand for what the feasibility needed to be. And like the finance team, they could update a finance model in 8 seconds by changing 3 cells. Construction, there's a little bit more friction with, figuring out the quantities of stuff, but in general, they were a lot faster than we were. And I just realized that the more site plans I did, the more successful the projects became, as I was working on them. And so that led to me building out like this whole Excel thing that would like try to like, I could basically design the whole building in Excel first, which I was like horrible. I was like, it has design really come to this? Like I'm solving a really complicated math problem because the real estate deal needs to work. And I'm using Excel as my design tool. And, I started kind of explaining these problems to my best friend at the time. And, still my best friend today, Ryan Grieg, my co-founder. And, he kind of like roll his eyes and be like, you like just build software to do this. And I was like, prove it. And, and of course he did prove it that you could. And that changed my life forever. Like he spent one evening working on a knapsack solver that would, that would solve like, via brute force a unit mix. And he showed me it in the terminal and I'm like, what? How do you do this? Black magic. Like, no wonder people like you were, had witch trials in the 18th century, because like you just made something that used to take me like 8 hours, you can do it in like 5 seconds. And so that's when I really started to understand the value of like what the mind of a absolutely logical engineer can really do for you when they're in control of a software stack. Like it is a power to behold. So I mean, your question was how's my perspective changed? You know, like you learn more the more broader experiences you get. And you know, in college, I was the weird guy that went and got a minor in business, and then I'm gonna go get a certificate in business. So I had like 15 hours of business classes, and then I was like, that's not enough. I like this real estate stuff, so I got a certificate in real estate. And to get a certificate in real estate, I had to convince the School of Architecture to move my studio time slot, to a different time slot so that I could take, it was like real estate law or some horrible class that, I would have rather been in studio, but so they gave me a waiver, and like me and my buddy John were the first two people in the history of the architecture program to like get this certificate in real estate, which frankly is shocking to me that like there aren't more architects interested in real estate. Like it's like kind of a fundamental component to architecture is the land that the architecture sits on. So I just had a broad perspective from the get-go, which has, frankly set us up for success many, many years down the road. So
I see. Yeah, like that's so super interesting. Like I think like we need like more like holistic perspective from engineering, construction, and design background to create and also work with like let's say computer scientists to develop a tool where domain expertise and coding can collaborate. Like I didn't know your father had a real estate background. So my family also has like civil engineering background, and when I was doing undergrad, they warned me this profession is tricky. We think 10 times before getting into it. So what was your conversation with your father when you said like, okay, I'm gonna either start Testfit or doing this architecture profession? Did he advise or warn you about something?
you know Dad's always been an incredible encourager, like no matter what I wanted to do. So uh when I was like, I want to go do real estate development, he's like, okay, go do it. Like I think to some degree every son wants to honor their father, and like we're kind of a more entrepreneurial business focused family. So he's just been an incredible cheerleader the whole time that we've been doing this, and provides frank feedback, sometimes, but other times he just wants to be like, keep going, like, don't lose heart. And it is a long uphill battle, like changing people's perspectives on how work could be done or how work should be done. The first time we had like a real estate developer who'd been in development for 35 years, he started using Testfit, and like he called me and was like, hey, I just want you to know, like, in this, I've been in the industry for 35 years. I've never drawn my own site plan until today. And thank you for giving me that like opportunity to like do this. And that's kind of what like the idea of democratizing computational design is around, is like, architects, they're using Testfit feverishly, but they can manually pound out these site plans. Developers, they don't draw site plans, at all. And now all of a sudden they have some capability to do it. That's quite disruptive, so that's why I'm continually telling architects, like, adopt this faster so that like the developers don't adopt it, and like, it's kind of pari passu. It's roughly the same levels of adoption in both industries right now, which is really cool to see, as it's a big problem for both groups.
I see. And like I always wonder, like, starting like a company is like a big decision, and many times like there are a lot of factors which come into place where, is this the right time? Do I have like financial security? So when you had the idea of floating, let's do Testfit, like what were some hard decisions you had to make at that time?
Yeah. So, when I left college to go work in a real estate developer, I was making more money than all of my peers. Specifically because I was in real estate, so I was already like pretty happy, And oh, by the way, I get to do all the architecture stuff and learn about real estate. Like, it was the perfect job for me, and it was really rough for me to leave that job. So uh I think that's my professional perspective. When you do a startup, like I'm married, on Monday, I will have be married for 7 years to Annalise. And, um, I think her perspective was like, I thought you were going to go like become a stable person first, and then like later we could go like do some entrepreneurial, journey. But um, she was convinced, I think, eventually. And as Ryan's my business partner, but Annalise my life partner, and she was in seminary at the time, learning, like getting her master's in counseling. So we we moved into seminary housing, like student housing. Like when we started Testfit, I was living in student housing for seminary students, which is great because like, the rent is much cheaper there, right?
Mhm.
And then when she finished her degree, we went and worked for Apartment Life, which is like another, it helped us with our housing situation. Like, it kept our housing affordable. So you're doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes to like try to make it affordable for yourself to live while the product isn't making any money at all. And then when the product started making money, then you have to make a decision like, okay, are we gonna like pay ourselves, or are we gonna save up this money to hire, another person? Because geez, we need another person because we're all exhausted.
Yeah.
So I would say having Annalise, her encouragement and support, gave me the confidence that we would be able to do it. And then, I gave her here's our burn chart, here's how much we have in savings. And, to get Testfit off the ground, I went basically down to zero savings. And then I asked Ryan, Ryan, I need food. I need pay food, like you're sort of feral, and you're like trying to get this product off the ground, and like, you want to be able to fly to, like, it was amazing. I had to make a whole budget for like a trip to Atlanta, and like we had like $865 in the company bank account. And I was like, I've been really talking to all these people in Atlanta. I think we should go to Atlanta. And, Ryan's like, can we afford to fly to Atlanta? So we have a buddy that lives in Atlanta, and we're like, Chase, can we sleep on your couch? And then we got like the cheapest like Southwest Airlines fare. Got there, we rented the cheapest possible car, and like I had 8 meetings, I think, and like 4 of them converted into sales. It was like absolutely insane. Um, and then so then you sort of take that success and you're like, okay, well, it's time to finance the next trip to like the next city. um and I mean, that's just how we grew, like outside of Texas. It was like, find one guy in another city that kind of likes you, and you're like, okay, well, hopefully we can go there and make some sales and make an ally there, and and spread the Testfit idea around. Initially it was limited to like cities that were in Texas that I could like drive to, and like this is 2017, so like people really didn't want to get on a Google Meet call, like they're like kind of
Mhm.
weirded out by that. Like now it's like super easy to just spin up a whole sales team that's just on Zoom because everybody's conditioned to it.
Mhm.
So people really responded to like me saying, hey, I'll be in your city, will you meet? And we had found a couple things that worked. I'm not a great copy writer. Like, I I've found that, we used GIFs a lot in the early days because like I just didn't want to have to explain everything with words. And it like it really worked out well because Testfit's incredibly flashy with like how it looks when things are being manipulated. And that's because it's doing everything in real time. And nobody had really seen that. And like people would animate stuff that would look like it, but nobody had ever seen like a tool that actually did that.
Oh man, I could only imagine like with $800 in the bank account, and like it's a big decision to make that trip, whether you might have like lesser money after that trip, but also like high risk and high reward of getting 4 clients. So that's amazing.
It's more expensive to be inactive than it is to act. Um, and there's other startups that have famously raised billions of dollars, and they hire a bunch of people that don't act. It's almost like to get change, you really need to get like a core group that can act effectively and then like scale that. But what do I know about raising $1 billion?
Um, so like, was that period the lowest point, like in the whole Testfit journey in terms of like getting like, if I were to take a step back, so is the company fully bootstrapped?
It was until December 2020. So Ryan and I, customer funded business for the first half of the entire time it's been around. And then, like we self-funded our ability to have a booth at AU, and like we flew everybody to AU. Like, you know, we were a successful small business before we converted into a venture-backed startup. And the reason for that is uh, the difficulty of innovating AEC is so great that the power of two people, like, at that time it was like 3.5 people because Caroline was working for us part-time. Like, that's not enough of a group of people. And so this is where my perspective has started to shift, is into the recruitment of like incredible talent that can help us build a corporation that can actually stand up to AEC in a way that AEC will respond effectively to change. So that's the big dream, turning Testfit Inc. into Testfit Inc., the corporation.
Yeah, and like we get so many stories about like AC startups being like on a verge of failure or like failed, and so so what was it like a strategic move for Testfit expansion in order to take from like, if it's like 0 to 1, in order to get from 1 to 10, you had to get that venture money for scalability?
Yeah. So scalability, peace of mind. We wanted to be able to hire people. And if you're customer funded, you don't really know where your cash cushion is to be able to give. When you hire an employee, you want to be able to say, yeah, you will have a job here for at least a year. You want to be able to say like, oh, we can at least give you a job for 90 days. Like, that's not great from a sense of security. And so you start thinking about, the kind of culture that you want to have that isn't, we want stability. We want people to bring the best of themselves to work every day. And if there's a lot of instability, that's not going to be effective in the long run.
I see. And what has been the most difficult part in like acquiring the first 100 customers?
Uh, Look, I think people get discouraged easily. Um, Sales is incredibly difficult in terms of like, you have to create a product and then go into a sales meeting and convince another person that they should give you money for this thing that, gives them value. And like, you're assuming in your head that there's value there. And for the first 3 years, like, I don't think we were feature complete on anything, right? Like, until we had like the 2.0 update where you could configure units and like really, really do it. Like, we were on a beta basically that I don't know what I did, but I convinced people to pay us for Testfit in that form. And I think that also says like is a testament to like how little innovation there really is in AEC. Because like we were focused on this, this wrap type building that's like it's only 8% of the, of the housing built in the US. Like it's a tiny market, and that's where we started. And like we got 12 customers from that one thing, like, and it didn't really do a whole lot. Like it generated a thing, but that was about it. Um, so I don't know. I was just encouraged. Like that's a sign to me, like an encouraging sign to me that like, okay, like let's improve our capability. So you go from wrap to podium to Gerben, like every step into increasing the capability of the product led us to more customers and led us to you know supporting the desires of the current customers. And I felt like for the first 3 years of the company, when I was really the guy on the ground doing every sales interaction, like I understood the customers super well because I was like, there's like some 1,500 meetings where there's like a record in our CRM of that. I'm sitting there like training my biological neural net to like the pains and problems of AEC, and like just fuels your desire for like more change and more engineering. And but then spending, I only have one engineer, or two engineers. Okay, what are we going to spend their resource time on? And so people would give us a lot of feedback, and you're able to have an okay feedback loop, and that that's how you get to 100 customers. You listen to what they want, and then you just deliver on what they want. It's not it's not rocket science, but I think the problem is that a lot of people don't have the ears to hear what the person's saying, or
Mhm.
maybe they're a technologist and they're just like in love with a certain platform that maybe isn't like the right solution space for what the customer is asking for. And I think part of this is like, because we're in deals, we can think more strategically about like what construction would want and what the developer is thinking about. Like we're not in full blown BIM, and it's the very beginning of the process, so you have a lot more collaborative flexibility. So I don't know. You said going from how do you first 100 customers, like listen to them.
Yeah, and like one thing I must admit, like for like from few of the colleagues who have used Testfit, they have like they really appreciated the UI UX and the whole customer experience of the product. So like you guys did an amazing job on that, getting that first impression and that experience that people love that product. So kudos to you guys on
Hey,
that.
it's really great to hear that, because and I kind of laugh a little bit because like Testfit is complicated. Like it's a complicated tool, and it's doing a lot of stuff. And before we updated our UI for the first time in like 3 years last week, like it took several clicks, 3 or more clicks to get to things that like you wanted to edit. And so like our UX, like we hired a UX designer, or UX. I got to get a better title for her, but we hired somebody that gives a huge flip about UX. It has changed, like it's changed my perspective on like what software should be doing for people. Cause like, my whole perspective was like, all right, we got to get the site plan drawn as quickly as possible. And I don't care how disgusting the buttons and stuff look to get there. Cause like, that's what the customer cares about at the end of the day, is like the quality of that site plan. Um, and she came in and was like, well, you have no empathy for any of your customers that have to click literally 4 times to change this one thing. So, I think also like, having spent years of customers telling me things that they wanted and berating me is like, it kind of conditions you to hear that from someone that you're paying to tell you, what's wrong with you. Uh, and I'm at this point, I'm kind of like wrapped up, like Testfit is me and I am Testfit, and like the problem is that like that's not true anymore. Like that it's so much broader and bigger than me now, and that's like so great to see. And anyway, so back to the UX, like she came in and implemented like, okay, we're going to be like no more than a click away or two, you know, like two at the most. Right. So like we finally fixed our UI, we fixed our UX. Right. And like, it's just, I think it's going to scream now. Like people could figure out the old UI because it gave them great value, you know, and that was like that was my perspective, is like that's what it should be. But now we're getting the same exact thing with an actually improved user experience, and that's because we have somebody here that really cares about that. And we're going to continue to update all of our panels and everything to be like incredible user experience for like drawing a road, you know, like let's rethink that.
I
So I've been
see.
impressed with the UI UX team so far.
Yeah, and like it also like shows up like how much collaborative you guys are, because I saw one GIF about Testfit and Scape integration, and like even you guys were doing something with TT. So
So
the
look,
impression you have out there in the market is very collaborative and like, okay, let's do this.
well, it's intentional. I mean, the future of AEC is APIs, and SDKs and connecting things. Like there was several years ago when I was like tweeting about like, you know, Testfit's now doing better, like higher quality massing mode or something. And, you know, it went from showing like nasty boxes to showing like slightly less nasty boxes. Right. And then someone commented like, why would you go into renderings and stuff? Like other people do that, you know, like you focus on you, Testfit. And, so I was kind of always excited about that idea. Like after I saw that, you know, that's like when you take a criticism, you're like, okay, that's a good point. Um, and the first opportunity came up with TT, with Rob Otani's team, and you know the thing was like we had this amazing parking garage generator that like can solve any geometry, you know, to I'm not going to, you know, don't quote me on that, but like it's the best parking configurator that mankind has ever built. Um, and you know, gosh darn it, if the architects didn't want to see the columns in the garage because they didn't trust it. And so a lot about what you do with automation tools is to build trust. And I was like, for 2 years, I'm like frustrated by this question of like, we got to get columns in here. We got to get columns in here. And I've got my building construction illustrated book open. And I'm like, what's a tributary area? Like, how does this stuff work again? You know, and I hit it off with Rob at a conference in Atlanta. And then I was like, I think he thought I was deranged. You know, I'm like, hey, give me columns, man. Like, and he's like, what do you mean columns? Like, no, I'm like really, like we need your columns. And he's like, explain more. And I'm like, you know, I kind of went through the whole thing. And finally, I think I broke him. And TT has been an incredible partner, you know, in demonstrating, I think, to the rest of the industry, like, look, this is an example of what all workflows will look like in 10 years from now. And we were the first to a commercial configurator, you know, for parking with this column thing. And that's really, really like a stepping stone in the right direction. Inkscape is another example of like, we could do rendering technology, but like we'd rather focus on the computational geometry component. And so we reached out to Inkscape. We're like, hey, can you guys give us Inkscape? Like, I know you won't develop a plugin for us, but like, can we develop it for us? Because we want it and it would be great for our customers. And, you know, we can make some money here with you. And like, we can provide a lot of value to the, you know, architects and stuff that are in Inkscape. And, you know, oh, we have some owners that are, you know, using Testfit. Like this could be, you know, so there was a business proposition behind the scenes that like really got Inkscape excited. And now like they're an amazing partner, you know, in developing this SDK. There's other companies in the pipeline that are using the SDK. So the goal is to get a bit of gravity around, you know, the Inkscape SDK for rendering. So, in the long haul, I think you'll see Testfit roll out with our own APIs, but we are a desktop tool right now, so like we're a bit limited. We can consume other people's stuff, but providing ours to others is a bit difficult for us.
So hopefully in the 4.0 launch, we have like
No,
web-based.
I don't think the configurator is ever going to be like split apart and broken apart. Like we're always going to have this amazing UX of real time generating buildings on the desktop. Like you cannot beat it, frankly. But we also need to create web workflows for how our architects and developers and contractors talk to each other about deals.
Yeah. And earlier we were talking about like how you had like different roles in Testfit in the earlier stage about accounting and business side sales. So right now, like you expanded the team. So how does a day in your life look like?
How does a day in my life look like now? So there's this phenomena, I think, that like as you scale out of a job that you were competent in, like you now are in a new job that you're not really competent for. So you're kind of learning every time I'm able to hand off a piece of responsibility to somebody. The hope is that they are better at that responsibility and can grow deeper in that, right? So I'm nearly at the end of my path in terms of handing off the things that I think are that other people are going to be better at. And it took 8 people. So take 2 years to hand off 8 people's worth of work. My focus now is more on vision and on product. So the go-to-market team is humming quite well right now, which it's like a huge relief to see them like take ownership of it and run and be so much more effective at it than I was. So I'm always inspired by them. And then on the product side, we have computational designers, but they're programmers. So working with them is like, it feels like studio, like when I kind of feel like the professor walking into studio and then like walking around the tables, the different programmers, like, oh, how do you feel about this problem? And like, oh, I like what you did there. And so just trying to get the configurators in a place where like architects can find them useful, developers can find them useful. It's getting the right metrics for construction, and having a good hand on maintaining that moving forward. As we scale even further, I think my goals or my responsibilities are more around keeping the organization functioning perfectly, making sure we have a good culture, making sure that our employees are inspired. We are a decentralized business. We don't see each other physically that often, so creating ways for us to have culture, and then I would say like I'm getting more excited and inspired by the idea of building out the corporation component, which is a good sign, going from just a product into a functioning business.
I see. And like one of the thing I feel like which now like AC tech startups are getting better and better is at community building. I see with like Speckle, Hyper, Testfit, like being very active on social medias and let's say on Twitter. And you're also very active in the community about your tweet. So I'm very curious, like, have you found any customer throughout with a tweet of yours or?
So yes, when you're a young person, like me, going to market, you don't have a network. So, I always in the early days, I kind of got confused by the question of like, what's your go-to-market strategy? And I'm like, I'm just going to be like a rabid, crazy animal and like, just go like knock down doors, like that's my go-to-market strategy. That's really a response to like, I don't know anybody. And, my co-founder, Ryan, like he doesn't know anybody. But like our parents knew some people, but my dad's experience is like this specific, building type in this specific market. And you can't go change an industry with like just getting like the people of Dallas to sign up for Testfit. So this is why I was encourage young people to get on social media, is like, it is a asymmetrical bet for you. You get a huge platform, you get a level playing field, and all you need is a couple of things to go viral, and you're doing demos for 2 or 3 weeks. Like Bill Allen, he posted a GIF about us, and I can just remember, like, I was calling him at the end of the 3 weeks. I'm like, dude, you have no idea what I've been through the last 3 weeks because of you. So, that's like, you get a couple wins on social media like that, and it can really help you because, you have no professional network of your own. It has been really great for me specifically to develop like professional contacts and stuff across the nation and also the world, because like it deepens your understanding of what people need and what they're all about and like why. And these are all things that can give you better insight to your market. So, early on, I kind of had a policy of, I'm not going to say no to any meetings. Recently I've kind of pulled back on that a little bit because it gets, I have to focus on Testfit, right? So, but building those links is incredibly important for an entrepreneur, because like you might meet someone that will ferry you to somebody else, like in that, like it is literally, it's like Minesweeper. You don't know when it's going to happen. You see some logic around it, but it's up to you to go one way or the other. Yeah. So that, use social media to your advantage. And if you're not, you're being a fool. People building, like, they're like, oh, I have this amazing idea. I'm going to build a stealth startup, like 1 million people out there have had this idea of generating buildings, right? Like, might as well build it in the open. And what we do is incredibly unique and it's pretty hard to copy. So, if somebody can copy us, like, good on you. Like, our industry needs like 10 more of us to make a radical shift in how we do work.
I see. And like, you mentioned a really good point. And I always wondered, like, if people who are starting out like startups few years after college or right after college, the challenge is like getting credibility in the AC field. So have you ever faced any challenges with like facing or getting new clients and who talked about the credibility?
So my only credibility is my track record. My track record is 42 releases that directly address the lack of innovation in commodity architecture feasibility. And then, maybe I can say, here's a list of the customers that are using us and getting an outrageous amount of value out of it. But those are my customers that are hard won. And, I kind of laugh sometimes when I see my competitors like putting all of their logos on their website. It's like, you're just signaling to me, these are all the early adopters. Come talk to these people. So I'm incredibly protective of our clients. But our clients in turn also see Testfit as a strategic advantage. So they're not blabbing to all of the other people about us. So, not the network effect that we wanted, but it's given us the ability to really focus on the needs of commodity firms. And commodity firms, like, okay, you're like Perkins and Will, right? So, Perkins and Will is like an incredible architect that can do any building, like any problem with buildings, like they're there, right? Well, the commodity architecture world is a bit different. Like, these are people that like literally don't have time to check every single set because they're churning stuff out so fast. And it's such a competitive market with all the other architects there. Like, it makes it really, really difficult for capital A architecture to compete with because they don't have the processes in place to be as fast as some of the multifamily people. So we have found, incredible adoption with, just firms that you've never heard of, and they're absolutely killing it in their markets. So, these are firms that just skipped the dynamo phase, they just skipped it. And I think that that's a great sign.
Yeah, and that's like one of the question I had is about finding the right customer and product market fit. Because when I see companies like Testfit or Canova, you guys have like catered a market which was not, no one was focusing before. So
Yeah. So I mean, look at so the last big successful acquisition in architecture was Spacemaker, and they did one configurator for one housing typology, in Scandinavia, and just relentlessly focused on that. So the I guess the takeaway from that is like innovation is there for the taking. Just focus on your problem. Um, I think too often we think of technology of like, it needs to be like Revit, where it's a giant monolithic thing that would take $100 million and, an army of programmers to like figure out how to do it. Right. We're not in that phase in AEC anymore. We're in point solution world, where we need to find effective ways of accelerating specifically painful parts of the process so that we can stay profitable. And nobody's profitable in feasibility. Like feasibility, you're not going to find a single company that's just slaying it. And we're cranking out conceptual plans left and right. Maybe big or some of these crazy firms that, can think on a completely different plane. Maybe they're making some good money on planning, but like I saw that Big was going to design a whole city or something. And I'm just like, oh, okay. Yeah, we need that to solve the housing crisis. Yeah, that'll work.
that's that's I, I always wondered like and I want to know your advice, like for all the budding young professionals who are planning to do an AC startup. From your experience of Testfit and seeing other like startups in AC space, what is your piece of advice in terms of finance and business side, like how to find out the right financial model?
Oh, I don't have advice there. Like we've really struggled with that. The problem is that in architecture, like you bill by the hour. Okay, that's cool. Okay, here comes a product that takes something that used to take 8 hours and now it's 12 seconds. So there's a huge disconnect between like the profession of architecture and how it's compensated, and what the future will deliver. So if architecture is and I think I've tweeted something like this, like if architecture is unable to like transition away from, this hourly billing component, like you're not going to be future proof until you do. So, pricing is difficult. So like, initially whenever we released, it was $250 a month for a firm wide license, like we were doing like something absurd, like we're like, we need to like afford ramen noodles, like whatever. And then like quickly realized that, they didn't see it as very like valuable at 250. So you're like, okay, we're going to make it more expensive and like per seat. And then, so you just sort of kind of respond with your pricing to what the market's doing. And that's how we approached it. We're likely going to try to find other ways to monetize. Specifically with architects is like, Testfit right now is like $6,000 for a seat, Revit's like $2,500 something. So, Testfit provides a significant value bump because it does a lot of the stuff that automates a bunch of stuff. But in the mind of an architect, they're like, oh, well, Revit, I do all my stuff in, and they're like comparing, they're looking at it from a cost perspective as opposed to a value perspective. And the software world's like, yeah, we're providing a lot of value here. And so there's a bit of a debate, about like how you should price software, especially with people that bill hourly. But thankfully, the thing that we're disrupting is where they're not making money anyways. So, you're basically like, let's just reduce your opportunity cost here. There's going to be more exciting ways to monetize, especially as we get into like more connected data flows. But like I can't wait to see like the Gensler API that lays out a conference room, and they can bill like $1.50 for someone to run that thing. Like that would be an example of embedding intelligence. And like, Ian Keogh at Hypar has like been championing this idea for many years. So credit where, credit given, credit due. Like he's got a good point, and like I agree with him. So I don't know. You got the two of us saying that's the future. We'll get a couple more CEOs.
Yeah. I think like I totally resonate with the idea that we need API to embed that institutional knowledge into like better products. But we also see like there's a lot of friction about like firms think that Grasshopper script is an IP, or that like they're not comfortable. So like, do you have any idea how we can like
So what is the value of IP if you never use it? It's worth absolutely nothing. So, there's construction firms that have bukus of BIM data just they're sitting on top of, and like they don't use it. And like, you're like, okay, what's the value of all that data if you don't use it? Same thing with like, the guys that spend months building these Grasshopper scripts for like, some competitive advantage on a specific proposal or project or whatever. Great. It works well for that one project. Will it work well, if it's more generalized algorithm for everything? So, if you can democratize a specific problem by building a tool, I'm not sure why you wouldn't let a whole slew of people use it. It's like, oh, well, we built it internally for our own, needs. There was like a construction, it was like DPR, like one of them spun out this tool and they made like some huge amount of money on it. And like, you can spin out a tool, grow it into a startup and sell it, and the whole industry benefits from it. And it helps your bottom line as a big company. So I think historically, it's difficult for architects to make the conscious decision to invest in R&D, because there's just not enough profit margin to really do that. So they're always hesitant to even think about handing out that R&D to anybody. And that's really difficult. Like that's a difficult problem, like in the long run, like Testfit can't build a configurator for literally everything. We're going to focus on like commodity, things. And we will get to a point where like we have enough algorithms that are helpful for other building typologies, and hopefully we'll have a way of people to like build their own stuff, right? But until then, it's going to be a try to do a one size fits all approach to configurators, because that's the only way we're going to build a company that can create this ecosystem.
I see. And what are your like thoughts? Like I see many people advocating the data sharing aspect in AC, but we all need it's important, but I don't see like a roadmap how we are going to implement like data sharing and open source data.
So none of the incentives are aligned, frankly, down contract. So, the likely goal for us at Testfit is to focus on commodity buildings where like a private developer is involved. And when you do that, okay, the way that developer is incentivized is through an internal rate of return. And what that means is that his investors will improve his position financially if he improves the internal rate of return. An internal rate of return is a financial metric that basically gauges the performance of an investment with a time component. So the quicker they get money out of the project, the better. The more money they get out of the project, the better. The less expenses that go into the project, the better. There's a lot of stuff in that IRR. So getting the architect on board to, plan a project in a way that would accelerate through construction so that the IRR can always be hit, like that, I think is a way that you get incentives aligned to then get the architect paid a whole lot more for their efforts. And then when they're paid more for their efforts, they can spend more on R&D. It's a self-fulfilling cycle is the goal. Same thing with the contracting world. I mean, if we can help create a clean model that they can actually price off of and trust, because we control the entire building generation ecosystem, and we're using the same algorithm again and again and again for calculating, totals of stuff, then I think we stand a chance of like kind of disrupting that cycle too. Like imagine if you're sitting in Testfit and your developer is giving you a budget for $40 million and all you have to do is design, and Testfit just alerts you when you're over budget. And that's it. Right. Like that would be incredible. And you've just democratized the pricing process. So we're looking into opportunities like that to get some across the industry collaboration.
Yeah, and like I feel like that is a big problem where like a lot of times like there are cost overrun and you start with a basic program and then you end up with a program which is beyond the planner's plan. So I could foresee like a lot of value for sure.
It's a frustrating problem going through pricing cycles with little to no feedback. So, the architect might never get the feedback of this thing's too expensive because XYZ, and the developer might just say, cut 12% of the units. Like there's a lot less clarity in that collaborative process because of how it's siloed.
Yeah. And this is like totally a random question. So like I heard that like explored the NFT and like blockchain space, and there are discussions about minting 3D architecture model. And then there's a question like who owns that architectural BIM model? Is the developer or the architect or the end user? Like what are your thoughts on ownership?
I think it's all really stupid. Like, I think what needs to happen for every single building is that a new business entity is spun up that contains like all of the data for that project. And then individual companies are like have an ownership stake in it or something. Like the fact that architects even today are like hesitant to hand over a BIM model that they know is going to get butchered to death by the GC anyways, like, just give them the model. Like they're all they're trying to do is reduce risk. And when they're reducing risk, they make the project more successful. So I think it's stupid. Like I don't have much more of a reaction to like, y'all are adults and you are leaving a lot of value on the table. And, are you going to really let a 30-year-old in Texas that generates rectangular parking garages and apartment units, like, be the one to disrupt this? Come on, let's grow up. This industry needs to grow up a bit. We need to be more comfortable with collaboration. And it starts with eliminating the design bid build contract and finding a better incentive structure. Like, you want more housing, that's how you do it. You there? I think you're frozen.
Can you hear me well now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. I think like that's a big point you made. With, I also think like with this generation, like who grew up in grasshopper, like like how they are dealing with this is also another challenge where there's a difference in vision or approach for a particular design workflow, and
Well,
startups generally have that leverage. I don't know.
so the innovation is going to come in. Daniel Davis got some pretty good brain on his shoulders. I think he calls it the fat middle, like this group of people that are doing like housing and the sort of commodity stuff. Like I think we're going to lead the way with like how this ecosystem should look, or what it should look like. But it'll take a while for it to get up to institutional capital architecture stuff. Like there's no way, like no matter what we do at Testfit, like I'm not gonna be able to generate like a church or like civic building. Like there's just certain things like we're not gonna touch because it just doesn't make financial sense for us to do it. So that that the way that kind of building is innovated in the future is a bit more unclear to me. Like that's where I'm like, yeah, Grasshopper, you're gonna need that, because like there's things that like we're never gonna do at Testfit that it's form based. Like Gary, you're not gonna do Gary building in Testfit. It's so funny. We had one of the sort of black turtleneck architects that the really, like, I was kind of taken aback that they wanted a meeting with us, right? And they go, so you can't do X, Y, or Z. And I'm like, no, I'll tell you what, this will be good for creating the sort of background buildings around your architecture piece. Like that's what we'll be good at. And they were kind of like, oh, okay. So my focus is always going to be on commodity buildings and the typical buildings that are out there.
Yeah. Are there any ideas you wish you worked on if you have more time?
Oh man, zoning information's a disaster. Like I've kind of given up on it. In the US specifically, there's a million and one ways that people look at it. It's highly subjective. But if I had another person in me, like I'd start another startup to just go figure out zoning information. That's incredibly hard problem. Like every company that I've seen that has been successful trying to do zoning, like here's what happens. They start out altruistic. They're like, we're going to help the architects figure out, like, we're going to help solve this problem, right? And then what they realize is that they've created a data set that's so valuable to like real estate investment that it's almost foolish to not just like hand off the data set to the investment community to be like, these are the best, undervalued parcels, in these 118 cities, and then the real estate investment world just buys like your reports on, what's underutilized. So I've seen maybe 4 of these companies pivot to that, because architecture is not good. Like it's not a hard enough problem for architects for them to be like, yes, we need to spend like $5,000 on these feasibility studies every single time they come across from a software vendor. They're not going to do it. Like they're just going to like open up city code and be like, okay, well, yeah, this is this. And, they're pretty good at it. Right. It's just, there's not enough friction there for them to want that, to pay for the innovation that needs to happen there. So zoning, I think, is, a tough nut to crack in the US, but, for a future API enabled world, like we need to be able to query, a database to find like what the FAR is here. And like, what in this jurisdiction is the definition of FAR. And like the way that you calculate, gross area is different than how the people in, Florida calculate the gross area, because in Florida you can actually use your balcony, but in Chicago, like people don't want to go on that balcony. Like it's not part of this number. So there's all these little local wrinkles that are complicating zoning, that you would have to figure out from an API standpoint. But I think it's absolutely atrocious that I can't just like submit a building to like an API and ask if I've like broken any zoning law on this piece of land. That like, you want more housing, just make the law less opaque about like what is allowed and what's not allowed. And then there's like overlay districts, and there's like, the FAR bonuses, and it's amazing. There's like someone calculated like the total possible FAR bonuses that they could get on a piece of land, and it was like it started out like base like a 2, and then like if you add all these things like an 8. So you're like,
Oh,
wow, like, this is pretty incredible, like FAR bonus up to an 8. And then it comes out like weeks later that the actual FAR is going to be 16 because the city council is going to upzone it because this developer is like making a commitment to. So like zoning is difficult in the US because in some cities it's a guideline, in other cities is a like a hard fact. You cannot touch it, and everywhere in between. So 3,000 counties, 6,000 cities or something. It's a cluster.
yeah, and even like the building code is it's a bit complicated where like it would be easy and a lot of value if there is a configurator which can do like building code compliance check for various clauses.
So yeah, like Upcodes has been a good friend to Testfit over the last couple of years. We've subscribed a long time ago. Like we'll continue to have our Upcodes license, but I think they're headed in that direction. Like they have a hell of a problem with localization. They're doing that right now. So for those that don't know, like codes and zoning are different. The codes are kind of the like actual like pieces of the building, whereas the zoning is like what do you allow, like what kind of buildings are you allowed to put here and what size of building you're allowed to put here. So like they already have a configurator. Like if you go into their project creation process, you can like type through like here's this corridor connected to this unit, connected to this thing, and they're working in that direction in terms of like automating the analysis of the codes. And whatever it takes, we'll support them whenever and if ever they have like a API to use. But right now, like they're in that growth mode where like we need more cities, we need more, they're providing a significant amount of value to everyone that consumes the codes. And it's because the complications happen when, Chicago slides in, like says, nope, we're not doing any of this. And, here's our local amendments. So local amendments are really great to have, especially when we move into more decentralized workforce in the future, where you might have somebody in Texas, or you already do have people in Texas working on projects in, Washington State. Like there's, you don't know who's going to be working on projects, and having that information about the local codes, like quite valuable to large businesses. So I'm very excited about Upcodes. We'll always support them.
Yeah, and like, what are some other areas in AEC space which is not being currently catered? Like, for example, in construction documentation space or other space?
I think construction sequencing, there's a lot of innovation there. They always make it like 4D, they're all, come do 4D, and, like, guys, let's make 4D cool, I think, and relevant to like an architect and relevant to other people, where more systems that are taken into account. This is what happens to our construction timetable if we go from this to this, and then wiring that up to a configurator makes a lot of sense to me, because like as I'm configuring a building, and can I get an API to give me an estimate on timetable, and here's all the assumptions associated with it. So I'd say like job site sequencing is something that I think would be incredibly helpful, because like there are design changes that we could make in the configuration of a building that would make construction much easier. We're not getting the benefit of construction's knowledge right now, I don't think, in the architecture industry. That's a huge opportunity. There's a couple people trying to do it, but I don't know how successful they've been. Way too many massing startups spinning up out there. Like, they, like Testfit was never a massing startup. We were like this 2D, like very specific configuration tool. And then like we released a massing stuff like many years later, because people kept asking us I just want to have like a massing thing next to this building. But like I have seen maybe like 7 massing startups, and they're doing the thing where you have a box and then you multiply it by like an efficiency, and that gives you your usable area. And like, it's not useful anymore. Like what's useful is understanding the parts and the pieces and all the things that constitute that building. So too much emphasis on massing, I think, from the startup community. Maybe too much emphasis on collaborative, like real time editing of stuff. Like, you
Mhm.
know, workflows in AEC are so like you're not. I'm never gonna. I don't want to be in a model while my electrical engineer is like placing wiring, or like I need to have my architecture set in place, and then let this guy get in and like solve all this stuff. Like
Mhm.
it doesn't need to be continual, and it doesn't need to be like a Google Doc, right? Um, for most projects, I can see it on some of these $1 billion projects where like you might have 5 designers working in separate areas, but like like there's not a whole lot of value in multiplayer in my mind in AEC right now. Like, we're not there yet. We don't. The feedback loops aren't fast enough to require that. I don't know, I've got some choice ideas.
Yeah, and like I totally agree where I see a lot of massing startups and also a lot of company building their own in-house generative design tool. And like, I don't know, like, can we have like one or two which works and then focus on other unsolved problems? But
Well, firms have to make a conscious decision to invest in generative design. Um, I can tell you that from pricing discussions with our customers, nobody has the money to spend on the engineering required to really get like, I don't know, generative design in Revit for like a big building problem. Like, it's really useful, I think, for like, we need to fill like this space. We need this irregular shape to have a ton of chairs and stuff in it. And you're like, thank God, like that's amazing. But I think from like the higher building level components, like where generative design is really useful to make big building level decisions, I don't see a whole lot of firms investing, their resources there. Uh, Especially because like we can come in, provide a superior experience and give them, more trust, frankly, in the kind of output they're getting. So I don't know. Generative design, I think it's on the back burner in AEC right now. Like, what we need to do is have more logical connected workflows that model buildings more realistically. And then we'll get, into a place where we can do actual generative design and optimize for 7 or 8 or 50 things. But right now, like, I don't think, like, we're probably the closest, and we're not really even interested in doing it.
Mhm. And like, I wanted to know your thoughts on like a lot of people who from AEC who transition into tech. I see them leaving AEC. So, what are your thoughts on retaining the talent, or should we, how to best serve the field?
Um, you got to change the business model, or the 12 startups that I'm ominously referring to are gonna like eat the lunch of every AEC firm. Um, there are tech enabled architecture firms that are following like a lean methodology that have like figured out how to improve their yield on cost, and are shifting away from looking at themselves as a cost to their client, looking at themselves as a value to their client. So, however AEC responds to disruption, it needs to be to embrace the disruption and try to harness it. Um, if you don't, like, you're gonna get steamrolled maybe by someone that's a bit more maniacal than me. Like, I'm actually pretty like, I tried to tell the AIA, like, look, if you like don't change, like, you're gonna die. Like, I kind of said that to them, and they're like, wow, it's never been told that before. And I'm like, yeah, like, you don't change, like, you're gonna die.
Mhm.
Um, And I think it's going to be just a slow erosion process. Like the construction industry has more to gain from controlling the design process than maybe anyone. So I'd love to see more GCs that maybe are led by architects or something. Like, is there a way that the agency of architecture changes from this design bid build thing to like putting the architect in a position of power and like an executive position in like a design build process? um so I think the model needs to change. Like you can't keep doing the same thing when there's algorithms that can do it 100,000 times faster. Like you gotta shift. If you don't shift
So,
it, like you're gonna get run over.
but like it's evident that we need that shift, but still people don't like take steps towards it.
It's uncomfortable. Like, we have climate change. What steps are we taking towards it? It's uncomfortable. So that's why action, people that act are likely going to have a larger impact on the industry, because like Elon Musk, a guy that was like acting on, and he's using like capitalism to make electric cars that like the like tax and spend liberal groups of people like really wanted this outcome, but now they're kind of outraged that he's now the world's wealthiest person. I think that's kind of funny. Like, we need more people like Elon Musk that are going to harness the forces of capitalism to solve the problems of housing, of like I don't think government's going to do it here in the US. Like, we're going to have to do it ourselves. And the way we do it ourselves, we build a great tech ecosystem that can then figure out where the best factories are to build the quickest buildings for the most amount of people, least amount of money, and the most amount of respect to those people. So that's the vision for the future. Let's go do it.
I see. And I must admit you have like an amazing team at Testfit. So what do you look in a new hire, or how do you find the right people?
Um, my recruitment style is interesting. If I meet somebody, and I normally am always kind of, if I talk to you and I don't know you, I'm always trying to figure out like if I can use you at Testfit. So like with Kyle, the latest hire, like he was at Autodesk. First time I talked to him, like we were like, it was peak COVID, and like I had maybe been introduced to a couple of people at Autodesk, and Kyle was one of them. And I said like, hey, like can we get a beer and talk? And I was it was nerve wracking for me the first time I talked to like an Autodesk person, right? Because you're like, oh, I don't, this is a big opaque company. I don't know like if this person's going to be X, Y, or Z. And like with his communication style, like he was able to communicate like some of the business problems that I was facing. But he was able to use words where I was like, in my mind, it was like these sort of intuitive problems and emotions that like I had about our business. And, that like was like eye opening. Like, wow, here's a guy that has been in a strategic role for a long time, and is putting words to these problems that I see. Um, you know, that led me to try to build a relationship with him for a while. And it ended up well. Alexine, like when I first talked with Alexine, Gordon Stewart at AU, actually, no, I think it was Built. What really intrigued me about her was like she was like what's the voice, like like she was more interested in sort of the voice we had, I guess. And I kept like kind of DMing her on Twitter for like advice, like marketing advice, because I was like, I don't know like what marketing is, like and so we spun up a relationship that way. And so those are my top two people. That it's a personal relationship that when I realized that we had a huge business problem that person could solve, I kind of sprung on them like, well, would this be, something that you'd be interested in? Like hackathons have been helpful. When I go to a hackathon, I'm kind of evaluating like how are people's brains working, and while trying to have fun. Nat McDonald like really struck me as someone that like needed more responsibility, and like this guy could be absolutely lethal if he was here. And I like he's gonna be our first product owner, like our first guy that like I trust this guy enough that you have my baby for right now. Luke Minich, met him at a hackathon in Seattle. And what really struck me about him is like his depth of knowledge, and then patience to talk through like a problem. So he's gonna be a great engineer for us. Already is. Let's see, Matt Kendall. Like I met him doing a training for a prospect, and he was the first guy that I was like, wow, I need that guy. This is like late 2018 maybe when I met him, and he had embraced Testfit so quickly at his job and was like, yes, like this would work, this would be great, this would be awesome. But they never converted. Like they didn't want to pay for it or something, whatever. So I called him and I was like, hey, I can't afford you right now because we don't have any money, but I think you're going to be I'm going to try to hire you the moment I can, like have money to do that. And he was our first hire. He was our first full-time hire in the US, and his energy, man, like he's got the energy. So look, like I've never had a formal interview process with a single person that I have personally hired. Like it's always been somebody that I have known and trusted, and wanted to bring aboard. And that's simply because like I don't trust my own judgment to judge somebody in like a 30-minute window as to whether or not they'd be a good fit. Moving forward though, like Alexine and Kyle have a significant amount of experience in hiring people, and like that is a great talent acquisition characteristic, is like to have people that have the experience, that can help advise me on whether or not we should hire a person that we don't know, right?
Mhm. Now, like I know it's more than an hour, so I'll wrap up the interview with some light questions. So,
Sure.
what are some lesser known facts about Clifton Harness?
Let's see. I started both ways in football in high school as team captain. Was the largest person on my football team, and so I don't know. That's why I'm big. Like I lifted weights incredibly often for like 7 years as I was growing into a young man. Also, like maybe I had some concussions. There might be some issues in my head, from there. Um, let's see, little known facts about me. I own 3 chickens that live in my backyard. We have like a coop.
Oh.
It's more Annalise's project, but like I still have to feed them. And we named them after our high school teachers. So like Annalise, my high school sweetheart, and we named 3 of the chickens after our favorite high school teachers. So I don't know. It's kind of
That's
fun.
cute.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any book or movie which made a big impact in your life?
Book or movie? Yes, the Bible. I mean, book wise, I'm not sure if you're looking for that answer though. Look, I like the Bible has been helpful for me because it's got a lot of ancient kind of wisdom in it. Proverbs, like for example, in humility, consider others better than yourself. Like I think of that all the time whenever like I'm getting pushback from a client, or like you have to have that humility to be able to hear them. So Bible, incredibly helpful in terms of just straight up wisdom. But I would say Traction, Gino Wickman, like probably the best book I read for my mental health and my well-being as a small business operator. But those are not like AEC books. Those are like
Yeah,
entrepreneurship book.
I was hoping for an open-ended answer, so that's perfectly fits in. How do you deal with stress in life?
How do I deal with stress? Um, Mental health is like incredibly important. Um, I think business leaders that are in their 60s and 50s right now, like they don't respect it. They're confused by it. Um, when they join the workforce, like you sat down at your desk, you did your work, and we're building a creative company that needs like really good brains working on problems. So like, you know, I don't ever want to be like a business where we don't care about mental health, because like, in a creative industry, you need your people firing on all cylinders. And especially during COVID, like morale can go really bad if anything, particularly if anything horrible happens. Um, so, you know, I think the Gen Zers and the young millennials like me that are going to start running companies, we're going to have a higher emphasis on mental health and supporting employees, because I think we maybe have a bit more empathy. I don't know what the deal is, right? Like they just from a business standpoint, like we're kinder, I think, to our employees just in general. Um, I think I answered the question, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And do you miss designing?
Yes, I really do miss um the design process. Like I for relaxation, like we'll draw like a unit plan now. Um because the act of drafting, there's a finality to it, right? Like there is, by the time I'm done drawing the unit plan, like it is static, it is done. And it's nice to have something that you can ship, that's a part of a set or something. Like I miss that feeling. Testfit, we ship an algorithm that will never be done. Like it will always be a continual improvement process. So you're always in varying states of complete or not complete, or like there's just no finality here. Like you're continually supporting something. So I miss that. Like I miss that part of the design process. That I'm never gonna say that I won't become a licensed architect. Like that's still on the table for me. So I wouldn't be shocked if after Testfit I do it, but I am willing to take Testfit for 15 years if it takes that long, right?
I see. And what is one thing that excites you the most?
Uh, the absolute excitement that my employees get when they get wins reminds me of me early on, like freaking out, like, oh my gosh, we made this sale, like, or we built this product, or just seeing them like that. That is the pinnacle of hopefully leadership success, is that I'm enjoying in their success more than my own right now.
I see. And which city is in your travel bucket list?
Uh, let's see. Right now, I would say Tokyo is probably like right at the top of the list. I have not been to Asia yet. I've spent way too much time in Europe, frankly. I think a huge weakness of mine is that I have not spent much time outside of Western Europe and the US as my sort of cultural influence. And when you're building a housing, solution that hopefully will go worldwide, I need to understand Asia a bit more. I need to understand Brazil a bit more. The BRICS countries, India, I think is absolutely amazing. Like the scale of development in India is absolutely massive, and they've figured out how to do development deals that are in like the billions of dollars, and they do them quickly. um, I think America could learn, frankly, from how India is good and effective at development. And I'd love to serve that market. Like we don't have a configurator for India. So BRICS is, Brazil, India, China, Russia. Those are kind of the growing countries, and you kind of want to figure out a good way to serve them. So I don't. That's I'd say Tokyo. There's my city, Tokyo.
I see. And what are your hobbies?
My hobbies right now are few. I mean, I love my work so much that it's hard for me to separate, work from life, maybe. So my fun hobbies right now are prototyping future products in Excel for fun. That, and then video games when I have time. I don't really, I used to have a lot more time before Savannah was born, our baby, but up until she was born, I was playing Factorio almost weekly. It's one of my favorite games, and it gives me a sense of completion and finality that I kind of need on the creative side. I quite like it, and it also is a master class in understanding scale. It used to be, like Minecraft. Like we played a lot of Minecraft, but Minecraft wasn't. You don't really have to use your brain in Minecraft. Factorio, you gotta think. So, sometimes if I don't really get to think a whole lot in a week because I'm just managing people, I'm gonna need to spend some time thinking. So I like that quite a bit. The chickens, my dog, wife, family. It's kind of it, man. Testfit is the, I hate to say it, but like I'm trying to make it not the center of my world right now. That's the goal, is like how can I be a successful husband and father and also run this business? So those are my personal, that's my personal hobby, I guess. It's not really a hobby, it's just your life.
Yeah, like definitely the work-life balance is not easy to crack when you have a startup.
It is not. And I am a serial worker. Like I don't stop working. I love work. I need to have a better balance, and that's that's the goal right now.
Mhm. Who are few AC techies or super users you vibe with?
My super users. All right, I'll tell you about a kid named Tanner Lawrence that lives in St. Louis. He's a young man. He works in a development shop, and he provides us a lot of feedback. Not a computational designer. Went to, I think he's got like a business degree, but he's worked so well at Testfit that they have changed like how they go about their whole deal process. So that's pretty cool to see. Pope Architects, like they are a firm that I think they're in Minneapolis, and frank conversations, man. Like, here's what I don't like about this. So like the technologists that we talk to, or the guys that I've really invested with, are like guys that are not writing Dynamo scripts and stuff. Like these are just end users that we've helped them solve a business problem. And I think like every computational designer needs to get their code to a place where it's not a computational designer using it. Like that's the big problem with Dynamo and Grasshoppers. Like you're still using it. Like you're the only one that can wield it, so you're using it. Okay, well, it'd be better if like the principal could just ping this logic whenever it needs to. And that's the democratization process that we've been able to tap into. And I wish there was more examples of it out there.
And I feel like customer like engagement and product development is very crucial. So are there any lessons learned you like to share from how you translated that customer feedback into product development?
Paying customer feedback is more important than prospect feedback. So if you have a paying customer that wants this feature and you have a prospect that wants that feature, and the prospect has a lot more money than the paying customer, you might be tempted to go after what the prospect wants. Resist this with all of your might. There is someone that is investing in you with their money. You're a startup. You have no credibility. Respect what that money is saying. I think in the early days, like there was a bit of a distraction from some large companies saw our capability, and they tried to, get us to give them a proposal that would essentially hamstring us from democratizing our algorithms to the rest of the industry. Thankfully, we walked away from doing anything like that. So that's my advice. Specific companies have really hard problems to solve, but if they're not willing to let you be a general company for the rest of the industry, like they're not going to be a good partner.
Yeah. And what's your vision with Testfit 2025?
By 2025, we will have built our deal information modeling platform, which is just a way of general contractors controlling cost, real estate developers controlling rent assumptions, and architects controlling configurator assumptions all on the same platform. We will have had built that and continue to have a focus on the configurator product, and hopefully other startups will have sprung up that can help build out this computational environment. But that's many years away. The amount of energy and the right kind of people that we need to attract to get from here to there is the same amount of effort to get from, the beginning of Testfit to now, if not more so. So it's an uphill battle in AEC to innovate, and you have to have a team that is willing to weather the storm. And I can tell you that we have that team. We just need time, resources. It takes a lot of effort to go from 0 to 1, and then an even more amount of effort to go from 1 to 30.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And so you had like a certificate in real estate, and based on your role in Testfit, what are some skills you advise for a young potential CEOs to develop or things to consider?
I think my greatest skill is knowing when I don't know, like knowing when I am out of bounds of my abilities to know something or to act on something. So having that humility sets you up for success. Continually questioning your assumptions. Early on we had this assumption that like no architect would want to use this. And like we fixed that by creating co-creation configurators that like they can actually work with. So like we had a wrong assumption and we fixed it. And now like some of our best champions are architects, which is, you're like, how is that possible? This is automation tool that automate, like we're solving a real business problem for them. So having that humility to listen. I had a prospect tell one of our employees, like, Clifton's bad at demos. Like, don't bring him to any more demos. Just let him be like the vision guy. And it's like, it wasn't true. Like I'm good at demos, but what I was responding to in the demo was like a lack of engagement. And I'm like, is this going to be helpful for you at all? And like, this is a different country with a different culture. And like, I wasn't patient. Right. So like just being open to hearing feedback about yourself from other people will set you up for success. Like you don't want to create an echo chamber around you. That's not going to help the industry. It's not going to help you. There's too many stories of founders that are completely go off the rails because no one's telling them no. You need accountability.
Mm-hmm. I see. And lastly, is there anything else you would like to share which we didn't cover in the interview?
We've talked for a while. I, I was on a podcast a while back, and like I think their final question was like, are you like an optimist for the future or like a pessimist for the future? Um, I really am an optimist for architecture. It's going to be remade into a more stable industry that has more value. I think I'm optimistic of that. Um, I what frustrates me is the lack of action. I'm kind of pessimistic on that. I think we need more action. And even if it's action that leads to complete failure, like at least you have an experience that didn't work. But don't be discouraged when something fails. Like every sale call, I had like a 8% close rate. That means that 92% of the demos that I did in the early days of Testfit led to like literally nothing. Right. You know, I think architects give up too quickly. You got to take the wins that you have and like exploit them. So
Yeah, I,
I'm
I
bullish.
think
I'm
that
bullish. I'm bullish on architecture. I just it'll be remade if they don't move and change.
that's a great piece of advice. And like it's a difficult industry to survive, so definitely like celebrating those small wins and like having that positive attitude. There's always one like down point where many people give up, and like maybe that leads to start a failure. It's always that rough patch. If you survive, it's
Yeah,
gonna make.
there's. I was talking with a guy like recently, and like he just kept bringing up all the problems. Oh, what about this? And like, well, you can solve that. What about this? Well, you can solve that. Like, he was so shocked to inaction by all of the problems that like he wasn't gonna act. And like, no wonder we have like climate change problems. Like there's nobody acting. No, like we'd all just rather sit here and complain about like Revit. Like, Revit's amazing at what it does, but like it's not your savior. Like it's a logical machine. you know Using your brain outside the box separates you from everybody else. Use your brain. And there's not a whole lot of thinking going on. I guess my main feedback is like, let's think, use your critical thinking skills. More startups are going to spin up like us. We're going to take more of the automation component to AEC if architecture doesn't do it. It's not going to stop with Testfit. Like, or if anything, we're the leading, like we're the beginning of the sort of charge of like, you can convince Gen Z to sit there and click, door tags into existence. Like, come on, have a broader vision for what architecture is than, the mind-numbing work of documentation. Like there needs to be a bigger vision here. And be confident that it's going to happen. Don't be discouraged. Don't focus on just one problem that you feel like is insurmountable, because like you can solve it.
Yeah.
If I always say this, like if Ryan and two people in Texas like decide to build a startup, then like our pedigree isn't MIT, our pedigree isn't like, we went to Harvard, or we didn't even get Y Combinator, they rejected us. Like, if we can enact change on AEC, anybody can. And there's so many more capable people than us to do it.
Yeah, I think like it's the action that counts. Like a lot of people can share the problem. A lot of people that okay, they have a great idea, but if they
Yeah.
don't execute, like it's ideas are nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ideas are nothing. Execution is everything.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Clifton. It was a great talk, and it was quite inspiring to know your journey, thoughts, and the whole Testfit product development aspect, which is quite inspiring.
Yeah, man. I had a great time talking today. Appreciate you staying focused for, I guess, an hour and a half. Thank you.
Yeah, I love talking to like awesome people like you. So thanks a lot. Bye.